If you were to ask me what is the worst movie I've ever seen before, it would actually be very easy to answer. If you ask me what's the best movie, that's hard because there's so many movies, I've seen so many, I like so many, but the worst one, it's really pretty simple. It almost killed me. Not figuratively speaking, literally, it almost killed me. It was that bad. The movie was Even the Cowgirls Get the Blues. It was based on a book by Tom Robbins called Even the Cowgirls Get the Blues. I think the director was Gus Van Sant. I had read the book when I was much younger, and it was one of those books that you say to yourself when you're reading it, you would love to see how they would ever figure this out and make it into a movie, because it's almost impossible. It was like when I read Lord of the Rings, I said, I can't wait till they make this into a movie. And it's amazing. When I saw that, Lord of the Rings, it was incredible. I said, I can't believe they're making the trees walk and fight. It was incredible. But Even the Cowgirls Get the Blues, it was such a strange story. I said, how are they ever going to do this? It was about a young woman. When she was born, she had really long, freakish thumbs. And she has magical powers because she can make anything stop and give her a ride. She's like a magical hitchhiker. It's a really strange story, but the author is Tom Robbins, and he's such a gifted writer, and he enjoys the language so well, and he writes so well that you just can't help enjoy reading it. It's a delight, at least the first half. The second half, it goes off the rails, and the character ends up in some strange ranch full of lesbians, and there's a Chinese time master up in the hills. It's really, I don't understand it, and I know maybe other people do, but it didn't do anything for me. But the first half, it was pretty amazing. And then when they made the movie, they put a wonderful actress in it, Uma Thurman. Uma Thurman. I would watch her read the phone book. I would watch her do almost anything. She's one of my favorite actresses. And I said, I've got to see this movie. And so I went to see it, and it was in a theater in Miami Beach in Normandy Isle. And it was one of those older theaters where there's still a lot of seats, just one single screen. And when I went inside, there were, as far as I could see, 2 other people in the whole theater. And I sat down and I started watching it. And within a few minutes, you realize how terrible it was. And it was as if they were just reading the book woodenly. It was just, there was no movie there. The script was terrible, and it just was coming across really bad. And I noticed that if I'm watching a movie that I don't really like, I start thinking about, what am I going to have for dinner? Well, very quickly I went beyond that stage of thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner. And within like 10 minutes or less, one person who had been in there, he got up and left. And looked like he had some bad bologna for lunch or something. His face wasn't too happy. And then, in a short while later, the other person gets up and leaves, and I'm in the movie theater by myself. But as I'm watching the movie, I can make out the top of a head of a person way at the very, very front, where no one ever, with who's any sanity, sits in the very front row of an empty theater. And that's where this person was sitting. Must have been a very short person. But so there's one other person in the movie, and I'm watching the movie, and it's getting worse and worse, and you just keep hoping that it's going to get better, because it can't be this bad. And then after a while, it doesn't get any better. It gets worse, if that's possible. And then you're going to think I'm making this up, but I start feeling like a little bit numb, like I'm just getting dizzy from how bad this movie is. Until finally, it's like if I wanted to get up and leave the theater, I couldn't. It was that bad. It was awful. It was god awful. And now I'm aware that I'm in a movie theater, basically alone, and I'm watching a movie, and I'm like paralyzed, like I'm freaking hypnotized. I can't get up and leave if I wanted to. And it just plots on, and it's just like I'm getting beat to death with this freaking awful movie. And then it ends in a really weird place, as if it can't get worse. It just ends where no one would ever expect it to end. And like the lights come on, and now it's like I was in a dream, and I'm kind of getting back to normal, and the person that was sitting in front, he stands up, and it's a short old man, and his face is kind of shrunk like an old dried up apple, and he's kind of chunky, and he's short like a fire plug, and he's pretty old. And he turns around, and he's not looking at me, he's just looking off in the distance, and he says, "What kind of movie was that?" Like, and I don't say anything, but then he repeats himself, and he's louder. "What kind of movie was that?" And he says, "That's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life." And now he starts repeating himself in those two phrases, those two lines over and over. "That's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. What kind of movie was that?" And he's moving his arms, and he's getting madder and madder. And now he sees me looking at him, and now he's getting louder. And he's walking up the aisle, up the incline, and I'm by the door, and I'm just looking at him. And he gets right in my face, and he yells, "What kind of movie was that?" And as he opens the door, there's people out there. They're not used to hearing yelling inside the theater like this. And so he comes out, and everybody's silent. And like a crowd gathers around him, and he just stares at everybody. And he just, "What kind of movie was that? That's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life." And now I start laughing because this is so funny. And when he sees me laughing, he gets madder, and he yells even more, and people are even more amazed. It's like the whole movie theater just stops dead. And now I had gone to the movie like in the matinee, so it was like in the middle of the afternoon. He goes outside, and I follow him. And as I go outside into the very bright light, it was so bright it was hard for me to see, and I had tears in my eyes from laughing. And he went over to the ticket person, and he stuck his face in that little round hole in the glass where you talk to the person in the booth, and he puts his little head, and he wasn't that tall, so he could basically he didn't have to lean down, he just put his head right in that hole, and he said, I'll never forget this, he said, "That's the worst movie I've ever seen in my life, and I'm old." And then I couldn't take it anymore. It's just like I bent over laughing so hard, and like tears are coming out. And I go to cross the street, and I don't realize the car is coming, and it slams on its brake, and it comes like within 3 inches of running me over. And he looks at me and gives me a dirty look, and he walks across the street. So like I get in my car across the street, and he's continuing to walk. And he goes over the bridge it's by the canal there at Normandy Isle Theater. And he's still got this terrible, terrible look on his face. Like this movie has affected him. So, like, that's what really, really good movies do. And that's what sometimes really bad movies do. They affect you. But this one, it affected me in a way that it almost killed me. But that was the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. Even the cowgirls get the blues. And it was so bad, it almost killed me.